Alright, so this anatomy chat will be on the hamstrings, their origin and insertion, so where they start and where they stop, and also the joints that they affect. And becoming aware of the joints that they affect will kind of empower you to modify your poses, especially those of you with tight hamstrings. This is good information to have. So the hamstrings are on the back of your femur. The origin, or where they start, is on your sit bones. So like if you were sitting on a bicycle, you can feel the base of your skeleton, the ischial tuberosities. That's where they start. And then the heads of the hamstrings, they run up the back of your leg, they split at the back of the knee, and they attach on either side. They kind of twine around the calves. So the calves come up and twine around the hamstrings here, and the hamstrings split and twine around the calves here. So this is the way the gastrocnemius and the hamstrings kind of reinforce the back of the knee as they kind of weave past each other. So obviously, moving the knee is going to affect your hamstring stretch, but the rotation of the pelvis is also really going to affect your hamstring stretch. And I think it takes a little more finesse to really know in the middle of your pose what your pelvis is doing. It's pretty easy to see if your knee is bent or your knee is straight. So I'm going to come up to kneeling. Bring my hands to the crest of my hips, right, so that you can feel your skeleton. Just draw up nice and tall. And I'm going to use my glutes and my hamstrings to pull my pelvis under. So the hamstrings and the glutes both extend the hip, which is like this action, bringing the pelvis forward, but taking your femur back. They contract, hamstrings and glutes. Basically, your hamstrings are reaching up from underneath, grabbing that ischial tuberosity and pulling it under. So this rolling under action is happening with your hamstrings and your glutes. So the opposite of that will be to go tailbone up. Now, right now we're kneeling, and this action in the hips should be pretty easy. There's no great challenge in the hamstrings here, but that's because the knee is bent. When the leg is straighter in your forward folds, that's going to really start to pull on the elastic. That's when we start to create a good hamstring stretch. So I want you to be aware of the rotation of what your hips are doing in your poses. So a real easy one is going to be starting laying on the floor. So I'll just focus on one leg. And I'm going to start with the knee bent. You can grab the back of your hamstring. I'm going to start with the knee bent, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not crunching. So a lot of people, if they're super tight, they're up here at first. If it's hard to grab your thigh, you could always wrap a belt. So super tight, make sure that you've got something around the back of your thigh if it's not your arms. But my head's on the floor, shoulders are on the ground, and I just have this leg in the air, and my knee is bent on purpose so that I have a little room to play around with my hips. I'm making sure that I'm not crunching. I'm making sure that the back of my waist is relaxed. So you could probably slide a finger underneath the back of your waist. So you want to make sure that your sit bones your pelvis is neutral. So I'm not like scrunching my pelvis under. It's nice and neutral. Then within the context of sending my hip bone back and down, looking for neutral, and I'm gently holding the back of my thigh, either with a belt of the hands. Then I'll look to straighten the knee, and this starts to tune up the stretch. I'm also going to kick the heel because that'll help these links in the chain line up. So if you can even experiment for yourself. If you relax the foot, you'll lose half of the conversation. The heel lines up the calves into the stretch, and as we saw earlier, they kind of twine in with the hamstrings. So once I have the pelvic alignment, straightening the knee and driving through the heel, we're starting to line up all the links in the chain. If I were to curl my pelvis under or crunch, now it becomes easier. I lose some of the power of the stretch, just like if I relax my foot. So if I curl up, I bend my knee and I relax my foot, this is no challenge mobility-wise for the hamstring. Rolling my pelvis to neutral, straightening the knee, kicking the heel. All of these things are really going to tune up the stretch here. So good to know for those of us that need a little extra homework in the hamstrings, or if we're trying to forward fold and you're just targeting, knowing what you're wanting to target. So how does that concept look in, say, wide-legged forward fold? Again, I'm going, if I'm way back here, so if my pelvis is tucked under, it's like removing the pressure, removing the conversation on the top end of the hamstring. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to get neutral. My sit bones are moving back, so I can already start to feel that conversation. Just getting to neutral. This is why a lot of times sitting on a block is going to be helpful, because it'll help the sit bones roll up. This is already creating a better stretch. Knees are bent. Yeah, so I'm going to get tall here, and then once I have this end accounted for, I'm going to drive out through the heels, even just this, sitting tall, lengthening out the legs. You can start to feel it tune up. Now as I fold forward and I allow the spine to move into the conversation, maybe as far as you're going to go, yeah, the conversation can get longer and longer. But initially you're going to check your pelvic rotation, and then you're going to think about straightening the legs. We do the same thing in downward facing dog. So I'm going to get upside down. Notice the knees are bent. And I'm going to push through the floor, spread the shoulders, drop the head, pull the sit bones up and away. So I'm not letting myself tuck the tail under. Really lengthened up nice and tall. Then I can think about straightening the knees and driving the heels back. And this starts to tune up the back of the leg. You'll see it in pretty much every hamstring stretch. Making sure your hips are in alignment and then worrying about straightening the legs. So just consciously seeing that technique in your practice, taking your opportunities any chance you get, whether it's an official yoga pose or not. Check your pelvic alignment and then start to lengthen the knee and drive out through the heel, and you'll integrate those conversations through the hamstring stretch that much better. All right, well, let me know how that treats you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.